From Vulture magazine, Leslye Headland turns Star Wars to its dark side. The Acolyte creator renders a positive corruption arc and faces her past in a galaxy far, far away.
That is why you fail.
Whenever a TV show ends, the creators make the rounds either to do victory laps or to explain why things went south. I love seeing these when a show doesn't work because then I get to see what the creator thinks they were trying to do. In an interview with Vulture, Leslye Headland explains the ideas behind the Acolyte, and one thing becomes very clear. Leslye Headland doesn't understand Star Wars. She treated the show as a way to talk about her personal story and political positions, and really had no interest in the concepts of Star Wars as a whole. Like Yoda said, that is why she failed. For example, when the interviewer brings up the appearance of Darth Plagueis, Headland says this about Osha and Tagalong joining forces, quote, "But these two other people having gone through this positive corruption arc and coming together in a joining of forces and a romantic pairing, we always wanted to introduce Plagueis as a foreboding complication." And now Headland's failure is complete. A positive corruption. That's an oxymoron. To corrupt is to turn from good to bad, to degrade, to taint, to debase. There is no positive degrading, no positive debasement. The idea that Plagueis, a Sith Lord, somehow spoils this positive corruption proves this woman has no understanding of the concept she's dealing with. Worse, she completely fails to make her point because we never get enough info about any of the characters to understand what's going on. Now, I gotta ask, what is it with this trend of people siding with the villains? Here's Headland doing it, and we saw this back in the spring when the conservatives sided with the anti-mutant child-killing villain, the Executioner from X-Men 97. This goes beyond thinking Magneto has a point that humans will never treat mutants fairly, or that the Jedi are too set in their ways. This presents people who do evil things as base, or at least misunderstood. This is Star Wars. It's a hero's journey. It's not that difficult. Yes, you can play around with the idea that things don't have to be as black and white as Jedi good, Sith bad, but you shouldn't get to the point where you can't tell the two apart. There's a difference between a Jedi controlling their emotions to the nth degree and the Sith reveling in their emotions with zero concern about the consequences. If you can't tell the difference between that, maybe you shouldn't work on Star Wars. And the whole article is proof that Leslye Headland has no business working on Star Wars because she isn't interested in anything about the franchise. For example, when she's asked about Osha killing Sol, she says, quote, "It was always the plan to have Osha kill Sol because Luke forgives his father. Luke throws away his saber and embraces the destruction of that generational lineage with forgiveness and compassion. He's a good and noble character, the epitome of a Star Wars hero. And this is a show about Star Wars villains. She needed to destroy that generational lineage." But that's not what happened. Luke didn't destroy his generational lineage. He embraced it. The Emperor wanted Luke to turn to the dark side, to have Luke replace Darth Vader, and it almost worked. In their fight, Vader finally gets Luke to snap, but when Luke wins the fight and cuts off Vader's hand, he sees that he's becoming like his father. Literally, in this case, because they both have prosthetic hands. When Luke realizes the path he's going down, he throws away his lightsaber, and he tells us why.
Never. I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Luke is a Jedi, through and through, like his father Anakin. He's not abandoning that, or destroying it. He's saying that this is core to who he is, and that he'd rather die a Jedi than turn against his friends or his father. I don't know how anyone can watch such an obvious moment and completely miss the point, but here we are. Also, the idea to have Osha kill Sol because Luke didn't kill Vader doesn't make any sense. Osha has no generational lineage with Sol, at least none that the audience ever sees. She's some kid he randomly encountered. They're not connected in any real way. We have no idea why Sol cares about Osha or what Osha wanted from Sol because it's not in the show. If the idea was to tell a story about how someone becomes a villain, 1, the show failed to do that, and 2, it would have been nice to tell that to the audience. There's more, quote, "Osha has put so much faith into Sol and was hoping to receive the love she had received as a child. I know the Jedi wouldn't use the word love, but that's what she was seeking. She needed to say, It does not matter if you say I love you, because I have been living in the shadow of this my whole life. But she didn't say that. Instead, she killed Sol as he tried to explain himself. Worse, the shadow Osha lived under was one of her mother's doing, not Sol's. Even then, Osha never says that the lack of love was the problem. She says she left the order because she couldn't control her feelings about what she thought May had done. That's what's in the show. If the audience was meant to draw a different conclusion, to think that this was because Osha's surrogate father didn't say I love you, that should have been in the show. We shouldn't be learning about this after the fact. Then Headland's asked about the family dynamics history in Star Wars and how it's all about fathers and sons, and she brings up Luke's temptation scene on Dagobah. Quote, "This is what it's about. What if I'm the bad guy? Do I feel like the bad guy, but I'm not? Am I being villainized by the people I love most? Or is this thing already in me, and the otherness, the thing I'm afraid of, what I should embrace about myself?" Headland says that this was a talisman for her in her childhood, so I have to ask, was that the last time she watched the movie? Because that's not what this scene is about at all. Luke's not questioning whether he's the bad guy, or if he's being vilified. The point of the scene is that 1, it's hinting that he's Vader's son, and 2, that if Luke continues down this path, he will become like Vader. Yoda even warns him not to take his weapons, hinting at what will happen if Luke chooses action, chooses violence as his first impulse. This is why Yoda and Obi-Wan warn Luke not to face Vader when he gets the vision. Doing this will make him more vulnerable to the dark side. It's all right there. I don't know how Headland missed this and got the idea that Luke somehow felt othered or is questioning if he's the bad guy. Well, that's not true. I do know how she got there. It's called projection. That's what she feels about her relationship with her father. She's a lesbian, she comes from a Christian family, and unfortunately her father passed away during the filming of the show. So the sister relationship angle she started with switched to a father-daughter relationship angle, something Headland says Kathleen Kennedy told her to do because Lucas did it with his father in the real Star Wars films. There's going to be a lot of baggage with that, and I get how that can go to a dark place. So when Headland says, quote, "My father made so many promises to me, and I felt like I failed because I couldn't live up to those expectations. Of course I'm going to lean toward the other side, the dark side, the otherness. That system has its own societal expectations, but I'm more comfortable there than I was trying to live up to what you wanted for me." I understand why she says it. The problem is that, unlike Lucas, Headland didn't find a way to make that work in her story. Lucas turned his father-son drama into something fantastic and primeval, drawing on thousands of years of storytelling to create a futuristic hero's journey. Headland decided to make a show about societal expectations and institutions without setting up any of it. So ultimately, the Space Witches have no real reason to oppose the Jedi never come across as bad or evil, and Osha has no real connection with Sol that the audience gets to see. Watching someone get pushed to the dark side because of their circumstances would make for an interesting story, but you actually have to set it up and make the character's descent make sense. It's like Sasuke Uchiha turning against Konoha, or Turin Turambar's tragic fall. If you read their stories, you can see how they get to their breaking point and understand why they make the choices they make. Except for Sasuke running up on 5 Kages. I don't know why you would do that. You have no chance in hell. And it's really bold to get your ass kicked by 2 of them and then go, you know what? I'm gonna go and fight the other 3. And then get your ass treated off panel. That's lived in my head rent free for 15 years. He's just gonna roll up on the ninja versions of Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Yoda. What could go wrong? Anyway, my point is that you can understand why Sasuke, after learning the truth about his clan and his brother Itachi, would turn on Konoha. You can understand why Turin, after having all his good intentions go wrong, would end up a tragic figure. All that is set up, but in the Acolyte, we don't get any setup for why Osha has any conflict with Sol. What little we know makes it seem like Osha couldn't cut it in the Jedi Order, now that Sol or the Jedi in general turned against her. Then Headland says something really strange, quote, "When you have the type of father Sol is, there's an inability to recognize that paternalism as insular. Osha has to destroy her father to keep moving. I don't know what it means, but for father-son relationships in Star Wars, there's reconciliation. For father-daughter, there isn't." Well, Headland is the one telling the story, so if she wanted there to be reconciliation, she could have added it in. That said, I do agree with her that there's a difference in the relationship between a father and son versus a father and daughter, so the resolution of their conflicts might not be the same, or at least wouldn't have the same subtext or meaning. Also, the idea that Sol is being paternalistic when Osha's coven of Space Witches try to control every aspect of her life is a little bit hypocritical. Headland says later in the piece, quote, Brindok was always a matriarchal society, and it was all about juxtaposing the girl's family of origin in a space that was exclusively female, and the coding of that is, of course, homosexuality, to the paternalism that a father would have for a daughter, or a Jedi Knight would have for a potential Padawan. I like to call it paternal rather than patriarchal, because it feels like it's coming from a good place. It felt new and different to introduce the threat, essentially, of women being able to create life. That would concern the Jedi, but their concern doesn't have anything to do with gender. I'll get to the latent misandry in a second. Headland wanted to juxtapose the good matriarchal society with the bad paternal Jedi Order. The problem is that the Space Witches did the very thing the Jedi are accused of doing. The Space Witches already decided the twins' lives for them. The twins have no choice. They have to finger bang the sky and tap into
Power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
because it's their destiny. When Osha hesitates, they don't listen to her or respect her wishes. They pressure her into going through with the ceremony. It's only when the Jedi show up that NSA is willing to allow Osha to refuse to go along with the ceremony, and that's only because now the Jedi know about them, and because Osha didn't lie like she was told to do. The matriarchy doesn't come out looking all that good in this situation, especially when the leader mind rapes the first teenage boy she sees. Which brings us to that latent misandry. Framing an exclusively female society as good, and whatever you don't like as paternalistic, basically male, meaning evil, is a pretty sexist thing to do. Imagine the opposite, someone presenting an all-male monastery as good, and anything they didn't like as matriarchal or feminist, and therefore evil. I'm sure Headland wouldn't like that. I'm sure the people who say they like this show wouldn't like that. Most Star Wars fans are male. Can you understand why framing being male as bad isn't gonna work in your favor? Also, why would the Jedi fear women being able to manipulate the Force to create life? There are women on the Jedi High Council. There are thousands of female Jedi of every species that can access the Force. Why would they care? Headland says they wouldn't, but then also says that it was a threat, which is contradictory, unless she meant it was a threat to fans, male fans in particular. But then, why would male fans be threatened by women creating life? There is an answer, but she doesn't want to say it. If you want to play the sexism angle, you actually have to say what you mean. Don't wuss out now. I'm going to hit on one last point Headland makes. She gets into the underlying political message of the show. Quote, "They're probably going to be mad I'm talking so much about my queerness, but I'm just going to do it because I made a Star Wars and only a few people have done that, and I'm a queer woman." In the words of Christian Bale.
Oh, good for you!
I don't care that you're a lesbian. I do care that you said you made a Star Wars, as if you were making a poopy. This is that bullshit. This is that bullshit right here. This woman is just finger banging my last good nerve. Just make your point. Quote, "I had a therapist who once told me that coming out as a queer person is not what makes your parents upset. They've known that, subconsciously or not, for a long time. What they're mad about is revealing a secret. That dynamic is also driving Vernestra. She understands that Sol was emotionally compromised when she looked around at what happened with these 4 Jedi. Does he deserve to take the fall completely? Of course not. But she has to protect her institution. People get caught up in heroes and villains and get distracted by what's actually going on. It's how people in power stay in power. It's how we have a country where corporations are considered human beings." That is the strangest non sequitur I've seen in a while, so I'm just going to skip right over that. Why does Heartwalls, yes, I know her name is Vernestra, but Heartwalls is a better name. Why does Heartwalls want to protect the institution? That's not a trick question. I genuinely don't know why this woman lies on this level for the Jedi Order. What is her motivation? See, if we did get caught up in heroes and villains, then we'd understand that they need reasons to do what they're doing. And the more complex the motivations, the more interesting the characters. But if you don't give them that, then there's no reason to care about what happens in the story because we don't know the stakes and we have no connection to the characters. It's fine if you want to make a political statement, but you actually have to make it and have a fucking point. If you want me to think the Jedi are bad, you have to show it, to prove it, so that even if I don't like it, I can at least follow you because I understand your point. You can't just say they're bad. You can't just say Heartwalls is protecting the institution. I need to know why, but none of that is in the show. There's more, quote, "Now that the show is out, I'm reaching my breaking point of people saying, you're making Star Wars political. First of all, George started that. He spent 3 of his films about the conflict between the Senate, the Jedi, and the Separatists. And overall, art is political. There is this thought that I am putting something in the water supply, and honestly, I really didn't think about it that much. I'm referencing the things I like, just as George or Ryan Johnson or J.J. Abrams did. Well, one of those people managed to make political statements by intertwining those concepts into the world he built. One of them added in lens flares and member berries, and one just wanted to subvert expectations. Headland didn't do any of those. What is the political message of the show? Woman good, man bad? All-female cult good, co-ed institutions bad? Is that it? Because there's nothing else in the show, and even what I said wasn't that clear. If that's what Headland wanted to bring to the table, then please point out where Lucas said only men could have the Force, or only exclusively male groups are good. If you watch the original trilogy, only one side is led by women and has female fighters, and it's not the baddies. You can have a political message in your show, but the story has to come first, and Headland didn't do that. She didn't even commit to the political messaging. The show feels like Headland didn't know what story she wanted to tell, like she had these random ideas that don't work on their own or together, and she just threw them in the show without fleshing them out. Maybe it makes sense to her, but it doesn't make sense to anyone else, and that's a problem when you're trying to tell a story to other people. The rest of the article is Headland gushing over Tagalong and Osha maybe knocking boots. The impression I got from the article is that Headland really wasn't interested in telling a Star Wars story. She was more interested in doing her own thing, and Star Wars was just something to play with along the way. Very few creative people can make that work. Leslye Headland is not one of them. The Acolyte is a perfect example of how not to write a show, both as part of a franchise and in general. It's a disjointed, poorly paced mess with unexplained character motivations, little character development, boring plot lines, and a mishmash of random political takes and personal drama that don't work well together. For a show that spent years in development, it should be much better than this. This is what happens when you don't understand Star Wars. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.